Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Master That English, where we understand, analyze, and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today is going to be the analysis of a playwright who wrote comedy. And the name of the play is The Way of the World. So let's go to the Restoration Age and enjoy this comedy written by William Congreve. So get your pens and notepads ready because here we go. Who is William Congreve? William Congreve was a major English playwright and a poet of the Restoration period. So we are talking about the late 17th and early 18th century. He was known for his witty and sophisticated comedies. Born in 1670 at Bardsley near Leeds in England. What's interesting is that he was raised partly in Ireland. He was educated at Kilkenny School, Ireland, and Trinity College, Dublin. At both the places, Jonathan Swift was his senior by 2 years. He died in 1729. He was famous for writing comedy of manners, plays that satirized the behavior, fashion, and relationships of high society. Let us understand what is his contribution to English literature. Congreve wrote his first play, The Old Bachelor, in 1693, when he was just 23 years old. His next play, Love for Love, was published in the year 1695, a popular comedy during his time. Then came a change. He also wrote a tragedy, The Mourning Bride, in the year 1697, showing he could write beyond comedy. And the great work that we are going to analyze today, which is The Way of the World, was published in 1700. His most famous play, known for its clever dialogue, exploration of love, marriage, and social games, was his last play. Let us understand what is Congreve's style and significance. Congreve is known for sharp wit and clever wordplay, satire of aristocratic society, and complex plots about love, marriage, and money. He is considered one of the greatest writers of Restoration comedy, alongside playwrights like William Wycherley and George Etheridge. Congreve acknowledges his debt to Terence and describes him as the most correct writer in the world. As Terence was a Roman playwright, known for his refined and well structured comedies, which he wrote in the 1905 and 1509 BCE. Congreve called him the most correct writer because his plays perfectly follow classical rules, use natural and elegant language, present realistic characters, and maintain artistic balance and restraint, making them models of polished and disciplined comedy. He was also influenced by Molière, the great master of comedy in the 17th century. Congreve was influenced by Molière because French theatrical traditions dominated Restoration England, and Molière refined satire, structured plots, and focus on social behavior provided a model that Congreve adapted into a more polished and aristocratic comedy of manners. Congreve looked upon Dryden as an elder counselor and won his patronage at a young age. Dryden led him to Ben Jonson, whose character, True Wit, in The Silent Woman, inspired Congreve to create Witwoud in his own play, The Way of the World. Let us understand now how was comedy of humors replaced by comedy of manners. The shift occurred between the early 17th century and the late 17th century. In early 1600s, that is the Jacobean era, comedy of humors was mainly pioneered by the writer Ben Jonson. But in 1642 to 1660, theatres were closed during Puritan rule in England. So, from 1660 onwards, when the Restoration period began, comedy of manners came up, which was mainly popularized by Congreve. So, the real turning point is 1660, when monarchy and theatre were restored under Charles II of England. Why did this change happen? Because during Ben Jonson's time, society still valued moral correction and order. However, during Congreve's time, society became fashionable, urban, and pleasure loving. Moreover, the earlier audience was a mixed public that was including common people, but the Restoration audience was elite, aristocratic, and court centered. These new audiences didn't want moral lectures. They wanted clever dialogue, gossip like plots, and satire of high society. This was the reaction against the Puritanism, as the Puritans had banned theatre as immoral. After 1660, there was a strong backlash. Now drama became more open, witty, and even slightly scandalous. As focus shifted from morality to manners, relationships, and appearances. But the question is, how did the transition happen from humors to manners? Comedy of Humors, which was popularized by Ben Jonson, was based on medieval theory of four humors, according to which the body contains fluids. Each character was dominated by one trait. It could be greed, jealousy, or anything. This aimed to correct the human folly like obsessive greed, excessive pride, and rigid personality as focus on individual psychology. Whereas in Comedy of Manners, Congreve focused on social behavior, etiquette, and relationships, where characters are witty, flirtatious, and socially aware. Hence, focus is on social surface, not deep psychology. There is a change in the character types, where Ben Jonson's characters were fixed, exaggerated characters, Congreve's characters were more polished and witty individuals. Ben Jonson focused on one humor, which was the fluid that was absent in the character, whereas Congreve defined social behavior. You could also see that Ben Jonson focused on moral correction, but Congreve wanted to write a work that is focusing on social satire. So, where Johnson exposes what people are, Congreve exposes how people behave in society. Johnson's language is more structured, moral, classical, while Congreve's language is highly witty, polished, and conversational. There was also a shift in purpose where Johnson's objective was to teach and correct the audience. Congreve only wanted to entertain and satirize through his play. This is how comedy moved from moral reform to social elegance and critique. So let us understand what is comedy of manners. Comedy of manners is a dramatic genre that flourished during the Restoration period or the late 17th century. Rather than focusing on action or plot, it emphasizes wit, dialogue, and social interaction, exposing how refined behavior often hides selfish motives. At its core, comedy of manners is not merely entertainment, it is a social critique. The backbone of this genre is brilliant. Epigrammatic dialogue, characters engage in verbal duels, where intelligence is valued more than morality. Critics often argue that wit becomes a mask for emotional shallowness, and language is refined but sometimes detached from real feeling. It deals with the fashionable elite, leisure class with wealth and status, and is concerned with reputation, gossip, and appearance. It excludes lower classes, making it socially narrow, yet it successfully captures the spirit of its age. The genre exposes fake politeness, hidden motives like greed, lust, ambition, and double standards. Now let us understand what is the restoration period like. The restoration period, which started from 1660, that is the early 1700, began when the monarchy was restored in England under Charles II after the Puritan rule of Oliver Cromwell. Puritan rule lasted roughly a decade, that is 11 years, from 1649 to 1660. The Restoration period was known for revival of theatre, as theatres opened after being closed by the Puritans. During the Puritan rule under Oliver Cromwell, theatres were closed because they were seen as immoral and sinful. When Charles II returned, people were eager for pleasure, entertainment, and freedom after years of restriction. Theatre became a symbol of that release. Moreover, Charles II had lived in exile in France, where he experienced a vibrant theatrical culture. When he became king, he encouraged drama, granted licenses to theatre companies, and supported the reopening of playhouses. Charles II reopened theatre in 1660 by licensing two companies, King's Company and Duke's Company. So revival wasn't just social, it was royally sponsored. Let us also understand what was the restoration culture like. The period was marked by a move away from religious strictness, rise of worldliness, wit, and luxury. London society, especially the upper classes, wanted entertainment, social gathering spaces, and clever, fashionable drama. Hence, theatre became a center of social life, as it reflected this new culture through comedy, satire, and bold themes, especially in restoration comedies. There was a rise of satire and realistic writing. Writers focused on society, human flaws, and urban life. Poetry, drama, and early prose forms flourished. There was a growth of scientific thinking as interest in science and reason increased. The Royal Society promoted scientific discoveries. This period laid groundwork for the Enlightenment. Charles II also brought with him fashion, inspired by the court of Louis XIV, as people started wearing luxurious and showy clothes. Men wore long wigs, lace collars, silk coats, ribbons, while women wore low neck gowns, rich fabrics, and elaborate hairstyles. This culture led to the rise of comedy of manners, as the people who watched plays now were mostly upper class audiences. So playwrights wrote about their own class, showing their habits, flaws, and their romantic and social games. The question is, how was the revived theatre different from the earlier drama? This is a significant time for women actors, as women actors were allowed on stage for the first time. There was introduction of scenery and stage machinery and development of witty polished plays that we can see in Congreve's work. Witty plays about upper class society brought about the rise of comedy of manners that focused on love, marriage, and social behavior of the aristocracy. Characters were clever, flirtatious, and often morally loose. Emphasis was on sharp dialogue, humor, rather than deep morality. Playwrights like William Congreve and Richard Sheridan became famous. Now, our next question is, why did Congreve write The Way of the World? He wrote The Way of the World to mainly reflect and critique the society of his time. Congreve wanted to mock the artificial behavior of the upper class, their obsession with wealth, reputation, and clever speech. The play exposes how relationships are often based on money and social advantage, not genuine love, as marriage in Restoration society was often treated like a business deal. Moreover, the play mirrors the society that has become pleasure loving, fashionable, and morally flexible. Would you like to know how the play was received? It was performed in the year 1700. It premiered in the theatre of Lincoln's Inn Field in London. Initially, it was not well received due to the morality issues, but gradually, the play played an important role in shaping the comedy of manners genre during the Restoration period. Although the play was not well received at first, it is now widely regarded as one of the foremost works of Restoration comedy ever written as a centerpiece of the genre. Let us understand the relationship dynamics in the play. In the play, the key relationships are as follows. Lady Wishfort is Millamant's aunt and Mrs. Fainall's mother. Then we have Mrs. Fainall, who is married to Mr. Fainall. Mirabell loves the girl Millamant and wants to marry her. Mirabell was once in love with Mrs. Fainall before her marriage. Mr. Fainall is having an affair with Mrs. Marwood. Whitwood is Lady Wishfort's nephew. Sir Wilful Whitwood is also Lady Wishfort's nephew and is proposed as a husband for Millamant. Waitwell and Foible are servants who help Mirabell carry out his plan. What is important to understand after this is who are the major characters in the play. We have the hero as Mirabell, who is intelligent and a rational hero, and Millamant, who is witty, independent heroine. That she is an independent woman who has a voice of her own, which is why the expression is very interesting to notice. I won't be called by names after I get married. Here, in Millamant's voice, we see her desire for respect and independence even within marriage, which is very commendable. And we have Lady Wishfort, who is vain and a comic figure. You will get to see a lot of things that she does in the play that always makes you believe in the idea of how self conscious she is. We also have a villain, Mr. Fainall, who is greedy and manipulative. And of course, Mrs. Marwood is the female antagonist, just like Fainall, who is jealous and cunning. So let us understand the summary of the play. This is a comedy play about love, marriage, money, and social games among rich people in the 1700 England. In the 17th century, there was only two institutions of exercising control over others in the society. One institution was wealth, and the other institution was law. Wealth or money is the power to control, as the genteel society of 17th century did not work, so money had to be inherited wealth. That is the reason all the central characters in the play are trying to acquire wealth. Lady Wishfort, her daughter Mrs. Fainall, and her niece Millamant are the three female characters who possess wealth. Though only Lady Wishfort exercises control on the money. This is where the legal control comes in. Lady Wishfort had a legal control on the wealth of her daughter, Mrs. Fainall, and her niece, Millamant. All the plots and subplots are centered around the legal extraction of this wealth. It has a main plot and many subplots. In the main plot, we see the central story that is about the hero and heroine in the play, which is Mirabell and Millamant, who want to get married. The obstacle in the play is that Lady Wishfort has control over her niece who tries to control Milliman's fortune and refuses to approve the match because she doesn't like Mirabel. To solve this, Mirabel has to create a clever scheme. He arranges for Lady Wishford to be tricked into a fake engagement with a man in disguise who is actually his servant Waitwell. By doing this, he hopes to gain control over the situation and convince her to allow his marriage to Millamant. After various complications and secrets being revealed, his plan succeeds and the couple is allowed to get married. In the subplot, the first thing we get to see is Fainall and Mrs. Marwood's scheme. Mr. Fainall, who is married to Mirabel's former lover, Mrs. Fainall, is secretly having an affair with Mrs. Marwood. Together, they try to blackmail Lady Wishford and ruin Mirabel by exposing his past secrets. Their goal is to gain money and control. In the end, their plan fails when Mirabel reveals he has already protected Mrs. Fainall's property legally. Then we have Lady Wishford with her fake romance. Lady Wishford is tricked into believing that a man named Sir Roland, who is actually Waiteville, disguised, wants to marry her. This subplot is humorous because she is eager for love and easily fooled. The fake romance is a part of Mirabel's larger plan because Waitwell is Mirabel's servant. Then we have Petulant and Whitwood's comic behavior. These two characters add humor by showing the shallow, silly side of high society. They spend their time gossiping, showing off, and trying to appear fashionable and clever. But they don't contribute much in the main conflict. We also have the proviso scene, which is a very important scene to understand, which is Mirabel's and Millamant's agreement. Before agreeing to marry, Mirabel and Millamant have a witty conversation where they set conditions for their marriage. This subplot shows that they want a balanced relationship, but not one based on control or sacrifice. Let us also understand the justification of the title of the play. The phrase the way of the world is repeated several times in the course of the play. What it basically means is that the play is concerned with the problems of social living. As man has to line within the ways of the world while maintaining the health of the society he lives in by protecting it from disruptive forces of the society. Secondly, he needs to ensure that his personality is not destroyed in the process. This double challenge is taken up and answered by Mirabel and Millamant in the play. People who endanger the society fall into two categories. One is the sub intellectuals or fools who pretend to be what they are, not by their artificiality. The second is the antisocial who exploit the environment and leave a trail of destruction behind them. So, in the play, the fools are Petulant and Whitwood. Mirabel, the male protagonist, cannot tolerate their behavior. He also warns Millamant, the female protagonist, not to stay in their company. Millamant also does not hesitate to put them in their place. While the other category consists of Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood, a pair of unscrupulous lovers who are out to get what they can. They use every possible strategy of deceit to exploit the situation in their favor. They expose Waitwell and threaten Mrs. Wishford to expose her daughter's misconduct if she does not part with her daughter's and niece's wealth. Eventually, Mirabel uses the weapons of the world, that is, the legal documents, to handle the ways of the world people like Fainall and Mrs. Marwood do. In this way, Congreve's title is very well justified. Let us also try to understand the significance of the locations in the play. In this play, the locations or settings aren't just backdrops because they reflect the social world of the upper class in Restoration England, and they actively reinforce the play's theme of deception, social performance, and marriage as negotiation. The play takes place in just three main settings. The first is the Chocolate House, then we have St. James Park and Lady Wishfort's house. But the question is, why did William Congreve choose these locations? As they highlight the contrast between public image versus private behavior. Though even private spaces aren't truly honest, they reflect a society driven by wealth, status, and clever manipulation. The limited number of location keeps the focus on dialogue, wit, and social strategy, which are central to the comedy of manners. Let us try to understand now what are the main ideas in the play. The first idea is love can be complicated by money and social rules. Second, people often pretend or trick others to get what they want. Third, marriage in high society was sometimes more about wealth than love. And fourth, honesty wins in the end. Let us begin with Act 1. Why does the play begin with the setting of the chocolate house? In Restoration England, chocolate houses were fashionable meeting places for wealthy men similar to coffee houses. These male dominated social space are associated with gossip, gambling, and social maneuvering, not serious work, where reputation is discussed and shaped, affecting relationships and marriages. As society is built on appearance and wit, as it depends on how cleverly you present yourself. A chocolate house isn't just a backdrop. It introduces audience to a world where social interaction is like a game, and people are constantly watching, judging, and maneuvering for advantage. Most of the male characters in the play are introduced in the chocolate house. The male protagonist, Mirabell, and the villain, Fainall, had been playing a game of cards. Their conversation reveals that Mirabell is in love with Millamant. But there is a problem. What is the problem that does not allow Mirabell to get married to Millamant? Mirabell cannot marry Millamant due to the strong disapproval of Millamant's aunt, Lady Wishfort, as she controls her fortune and dislikes Mirabell. As Mirabell had pretended to court Lady Wishfort in order to hide his love from Millamant. Lady Wishfort's vanity was hurt when the truth is discovered. So if Mirabell married Millamant without Lady Wishfort's approval, she will lose her inheritance. So, love in this world is tied closely to money and social approval. Now let us understand what information is given to Mirabell when Fainall leaves for a while. When Fainall leaves for a while, a footman comes and tells Mirabell that Waitwell, Mirabell's male servant, and Foible, Lady Wishfort's female servant, were getting married that morning. The news about the servants getting married is vital, as it would ensure the loyalty of the servants to ensure the success of his plan. What information do Petulin and Woodwood give to Mirabell and Fainall? They are also seen in Act 1. They are informed that Witwoud's elder brother is coming to court Millamant. Through Petulant, Mirabell is informed that his uncle is staying at Lady Wishfort. If he should marry and have a child, then Mirabell may be disinherited. Also, he is informed about the rumor about a marriage between Mirabell's uncle and Millamant. Through the ways of the world, we are introduced to the male characters in the play. Congreve has reflected the mindset of the villain in the Restoration period through Fainall, who says that he is attracted to a woman who is careful and serious about her honor, because such a woman is more challenging and interesting to pursue, because it makes the chase more exciting and satisfying for him. As in the Restoration Society, a woman's reputation, honor, and respectability was extremely important. Then I'd make love to a woman who undervalued the loss of her reputation. This is not just reflecting his cynical and manipulative nature, but also showing the moral corruption in Restoration Society. In contrast, Congreve has juxtaposed the hero Mirabell as mature and realistic, not blindly idealistic. When he expresses his love for Millamant and accepts her in her totality with all her flaws, or rather, he likes her because of her faults, as they make her attractive, more realistic, and agreeable.
I like her with all her faults. Nay, like her for her faults. Her follies are so natural and so artful that they become her, and those affections which in another woman would be odious serve but to make her more agreeable.
In Restoration comedy, people judge based on appearance and manners. Congreve suggests that real value lies deeper, as real relationships are not about perfection, as love means accepting weaknesses and quirks. Through Mirabell, Congreve suggests that true love is based on understanding and acceptance, not superficial perfection, and offers a contrast to the artificial and hypocritical relationships of the Restoration Society. This attribute in Mirabell makes him popular with the women then and even today. We are also introduced to coxcombs like Petulant and Whitwood. Congreve uses Petulant and Whitwood as contrast to Mirabell to highlight the difference between true and false wit. Through their exaggerated foolishness and pretension, he satirizes their artificial behavior, while making Mirabell's intelligence and refinement stand out more clearly. Thus, Act 1 is vital as it introduces us to the themes of deception, love versus money, and social hypocrisy. It shows that in this world, you cannot get love without playing a clever social game. Let us now understand Act 2. Why does Congreve choose St. James Park as the setting for Act 2? As this is a public space where people walk, gossip, and socialize while observing and judging each other. Now, what are Mrs. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood talking about in the park? Mrs. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood are discussing love and marriage on the basis of their personal experiences. They are wary of each other despite appearing friendly outwardly. Mrs. Fainall suspects that Mrs. Marwood also likes Mirabell from her reactions. They are joined by Fainall and Mirabell. Somehow, Fainall and Mrs. Marwood get separated from Mirabell and Mrs. Fainall. Now, it is important to understand what do the conversation between the two couples reveal. When the two characters are left alone, it becomes clear that Fainall and Mrs. Marwood are having an affair. Their relationship is based on secrecy, jealousy, and manipulation rather than genuine affection. Fainall admits that he married Mrs. Fainall for financial gain. This exposes his greed and selfishness. The conversation between Mirabell and Mrs. Fainall reveals their former romantic relationship. However, they are now friends and allies rather than lovers. Mirabell tells Mrs. Fainall about his scheme. His servant Waitwell, disguised as Sir Roland, a fictitious uncle of Mirabell, will trick Lady Wishfort into marriage. When the truth is revealed, Mirabell hopes to gain Lady Wishfort's consent to his marriage with Millamant. Now let us try to understand what does the interaction between Millamant and Mirabell convey. Millamant appears a witty and fashionable personality. Mirabell and Millamant flirt and exchange witty remarks. Their relationship is based on wit and equality rather than simple romance. What is important to understand here is who sees Foible talking to Mirabell. Foible reports to Mirabell that Lady Wishfort has already heard about the wealthy Sir Roland. Mrs. Marwood sees Mirabell talking to Foible and heads to Lady Wishfort's house to warn her against Foible. In this act, Congreve exposes the emotional complications, jealousy, and betrayal between the characters. We also get deeper insights into the characters of the three women, that is, Millamant, Mrs. Marwood, and Mrs. Fainall. Mrs. Marwood is secretly in love with Mirabell, yet she pretends to hate him. She is manipulative and emotionally driven, and involved in an immoral affair with Mr. Fainall. She represents jealousy and hidden passion with her words.
I'll publish to the world the injuries you have done to me, both in my fame and fortune. With both I trusted you. You bankrupt in honor as indigent of wealth.
These lines reveal Mrs. Marwood's vindictive and assertive nature. Feeling betrayed, she threatens to expose Fainall publicly, showing her capacity for revenge. Mrs. Fainall, as the former lover of Mirabell, is trapped in a bad marriage with Mr. Fainall. She is honest, sensible, and self controlled. She is a loyal friend to Mirabell. If we were to be happy, we must find the means in ourselves and among ourselves. Men are ever extremes, either doting or averse. The statement reveals Mrs. Fainall's practical wisdom and emotional maturity. Disillusioned by her unhappy marriage, she believes that women should rely on themselves and on each other for happiness rather than on men, whom she sees as inconsistent and extreme. The line highlights her rational, composed nature and reflects Congreve's critique of unstable relationships and marriage in Restoration Society. While Millamant represents true wit and controlled intelligence, she loves Mirabell genuinely. She challenges traditional feminine behavior and refuses to be emotionally dependent and controlled by men. She challenges romantic idealism with her words. Lord, what is a lover that it can give? Why one makes lovers as fast as one pleases? And they live as long as one pleases? And they die as soon as one pleases? And then, if one pleases, one makes more. The statement shows Millamant's witty and independent attitude towards love. She treats lovers as temporary and controllable, suggesting that relationships can be created and ended at will. This reflects her desire for freedom, her rejection of traditional romantic ideals, and her role as a modern restoration woman. Through her, Congreve satirizes the artificial and superficial nature of love in high society, especially through the love that Millamant sings in Act 3. Love's not the frailty of the mind when 'tis not with ambition joined, a sickly frame which if not fed expires, and feeding waste in self-consuming fires. In this way, Act 2 introduces us to three women, and builds the main conflict by exposing the emotional complications, jealousy, and betrayal amongst characters. Let us now try to understand Act 3, Lady Wishfort's house, where the deception begins. The setting shifts to Lady Wishfort's house, where she is eagerly waiting to meet her supposed suitor, Sir Roland. Now, the question is, what kind of a person is Lady Wishfort? Through Lady Wishfort, Congreve is mocking people who are obsessed with status and romance. Lady Wishfort is a 55-year-old widow, very vain and dramatic. She has never met Sir Roland, but she is desperate to impress him and marry him. As soon as romance appears, her man-hatting persona crumbles. Congreve presents her as foolish, just like Whitwood and petulant. She is also cruel. She scolds Peg unfairly about her makeup. She is vain as she wants to look much younger. She is also spoilt, as instead of helping herself, she complains that Foible is not there to help her. Her excessive fondness for drinking may explain her behavior. Now, the question is, what is Lady Wishfort's obsession for makeup indicative of? I look like a peeled wall. Thou must repair me, Foible, before Sir Roland comes, for I shall never keep up with any picture. Lady Wishfort views her appearance as a way to earn love from a man. This contrasts with Mirabell's opinion, who said that a woman becomes beautiful once she is in love. But Lady Wishfort seems to lack confidence in this regard. In contrast to her niece Millamant, as she requires an armor in the form of makeup to face the world. This shows the indifference between the confident modern younger generation than the traditional older generation. So, why does Mrs. Wishfort trust Mrs. Marwood? She trusts Mrs. Marwood because of their participation in the Cabal Nights together. Lady Wishfort believes she can trust Mrs. Marwood. In her vanity, Lady Wishfort has lost her ability to distinguish friendship from flattery. This quality allows other characters to manipulate and take advantage of her. So, how does Mrs. Marwood come to know of the details of Mirabell's plan? When Mrs. Marwood comes to inform Mrs. Wishfort that she has seen the maid Foible talking to Mirabell, they are interrupted by Foible. So Mrs. Wishfort asks her to hide in the chamber so she can confront Foible. While hiding in Mrs. Wishfort's chamber, Mrs. Marwood overhears Foible and Mrs. Fainall discuss the key details of Mirabell's entire scheme. She comes to know that Waitwell is disguised as Sir Roland to deceive Lady Wishfort. The plan is to entangle Lady Wishfort in a marriage which cannot go ahead, because it would be a bigamy and a social disgrace, as Waitwell is already married and only a serving man, while Lady Wishfort is an aristocrat. This situation will trap Lady Wishfort into a compromising situation. Mirabell plans to use this situation to marry and secure Millamant's fortune. These details allow Mrs. Marwood to understand Mirabell's romantic goal and the strategic manipulation of Lady Wishfort, which she later tries to expose. So, when we talk about Mrs. Marwood, we should also try to understand how does Mrs. Marwood use the information to launch her counter-attack. Mrs. Marwood concocts her plan rashly, trying to think of the quickest way to hurt Mirabell and foil his engagement to Millamant. She proposes marriage between Millamant and her cousin, Sir Wilful, to break Mirabell's heart. Congreve suggests that Mrs. Marwood, like Mrs. Wishfort, wishes to destroy Mirabell as revenge for her is unrequited love. So, what is the main significance of Act 3? Act 3 does not resolve anything. It increases tension and prepares the audience for the dramatic events. The focus is on the unfolding of Mirabel's plan and the reactions of Lady Wishfort and Mr. Fenall, where Lady Wishfort appears as vain, foolish, and easy to manipulate, as even the maid Foible is able to fool her and make her react in this manner. I'll reduce him to flippery and rags. The Tatamendilion, I hope to see him hung with tatters, like a long lane penthouse with a gabbard thief. Let us understand Act 4, which is the proviso scene and rising conflict. What is the highlight of Act 4? The highlight of Act 4 is the famous proviso scene, or the prenuptial contract, where both Mirabel and Millamant put forth their conditions for marriage. The proviso scene is one of the finest examples of restoration wit. The playful bargaining between Mirabel and Millamant provides comedy while revealing their intelligence and compatibility. Many critics consider this scene the heart of the play because it presents Congreve's vision of an ideal marriage based on love, equality, trust, freedom, and mutual respect, rather than money or social convenience. So, what do the terms of their marriage contract reflect? Instead of romantic declarations, they negotiate the terms of their marriage, where Millamant demands independence. Mirabel agrees but also sets conditions. This shows marriage as a contract, not emotional surrender. In the meantime, what are Mrs. Marwood's and Fainall planning? Fainall and Marwood plan to exploit Mrs. Wishfort by exposing the fake Sir Roland plot. Fainall decides to blackmail Lady Wishfort by using her attempted secret marriage and his wife's Mrs. Fainall's past relationship with Mirabel. The Act 4 shows marriage as a rational agreement in the proviso scene, as the scene marks the moment when the two lovers openly express their commitment to each other, as their marriage is based on mutual understanding and respect. Unlike traditional marriages of the Restoration period, where husband dominated the wife, Mirabel and Millamant negotiate as equals. Both are allowed to place conditions before marriage, suggesting that a successful marriage should be founded on cooperation rather than authority. Congreve has shown Millamant as a representative of the women in the 17th century, who wants the freedom to live her life on her own terms after marriage. I'll lie abed in the morning as long as I please. This statement of Millamant is central in the proviso scene and is a symbol of female autonomy and individuality. She refuses to lose her identity or be controlled by her husband. I won't be called names after I'm married. In this way, she challenges traditional marriage, and William Congreve shows marriage as a negotiation of equality. She demands for space even within marriage. Let us never visit together nor go to play together. This statement redefines marriage as independent partnership and satirizes romantic expectations. She values trust and sincerity rather than excessive flattery. I like a lover that can dare to be trusted. In this way, she critiques fake courtship by emphasizing on honest relationships and proves that she is looking for a marriage between two equal partners to ensure that it is a success. Liberated from social expectation, Millamant can demand her husband must always knock before entering her room, and that she may be in complete control of her appearance and social life. Millamant has not just finished setting out her terms for marriage, and is also insisting on her independence and freedom. Despite her witty and practical negotiations, she genuinely loves Mirabel. If Mirabel should make a good husband, I am a lost thing, for I find I love him violently. Through the negotiation between Mirabel and Millamant, Congreve presents his modern view of marriage as a balanced partnership between two intelligent equals, making it most memorable and important scene in the play. Mirabel loves Millamant in her natural state. The image of makeup, corset free Millamant contrasts sharply with the images of Lady Wishford, stuffing herself into whale bowl corsets, paint flaking off her pale face to impress Sir Roland. Clearly in love, the couple complements each other physically, mentally, and emotionally. Congreve contrasts this match sharply with the only other true competitor for Millamant's hand. Sir Wilful lacks Mirabel's suave confidence, bumbling confusedly through his conversation with Millamant. He mistakes Millamant's poetry for slang, which suggests that the two are so terribly mismatched that they don't even speak the same language. In contrast, when Mirabel arrives, he literally finishes Millamant's sentence, interestingly suggesting their perfect harmony with each other. Let us understand Act 5, which is about resolution and justice. The scene also takes place in Mrs. Wishfort's house. Now, what is important for us to understand is, why does Lady Wishfort thank Mrs. Marwood? Lady Wishfort found out Mirabel's plot from Mrs. Marwood and Fainall and had Waitwell arrested. Mrs. Fainall's affair with Mirabel is now public knowledge. Lady Wishfort thanks Mrs. Marwood for unveiling the plot. She also pretends to negotiate for Mrs. Wishfort with Mr. Fainall. But the question is, how does Fainall blackmail Lady Wishfort? He threatens Lady Wishfort with scandal by exposing her and her daughter, Mrs. Fainall. He also tells her that she should never marry and demands control over her property and tries to ruin Mirabel. After so much trouble, how does Mirabel eventually marry Millamant with Mrs. Wishfort's blessings and turn the table against Fainall? Mirabel had anticipated betrayal and already secured a legal deed that protects Mrs. Fainall's property.
I have the deed which secures her whole estate.
So, when Lady Wishfort offers Mirabel her consent to the marriage, if he could save her fortune and honor, Mirabel calls on Waitwell, who brings a contract from the time before the marriage of Fainall, in which Mrs. Fainall gives all her property in trust to Mirabel. This neutralizes the blackmail attempts, after which Mirabel restores Mrs. Fainall's property to her possession and then is free to marry Millamant with the full £12,000 inheritance. In this way, intelligence defeats villainy. And this becomes the turning point of the play as it ruins Fainall's plan completely. So, how is there a restoration of justice and moral closure? Fainall is exposed and defeated, as Fainall's power and influence are over. His time of merit is past. Lady Wishfort forgives Mirabel and allow him to marry Millamant. Social order is restored. In this way, Congreve brings about the restoration of moral and social balance and a satirical happy ending. What is the message that William Congreve wants to give in the play? Congreve's message in The Way of the World is that society is often governed by greed, deception, and concern for appearances, but genuine love, intelligence, and honesty ultimately triumph. Through satire, he exposes the flaws of Restoration society and advocates a marriage based on mutual respect rather than wealth or social advantage. William Hazlitt, a well known critic of the time, called it the most refined form of comedy, praising its wit and structure. Then we had Charles Lamb, again a very famous prose writer, admired its elegance and believed it should be enjoyed as art and not judged morally. Even the well known Samuel Johnson criticized it for lacking moral purpose and emotional depth. The play had mixed reviews in this way. So, in the end, is Comedy of Manners a brilliant satire, or is it superficial and ethically empty? Strength of Comedy of Manners is that it is a brilliant use of wit and polished language, sharp social observation, realistic portrayal of human selfishness, and entertaining yet intellectually engaging. However, its limitations are that it lacks emotional depth and it focuses on the elite. Sometimes it appears immoral or cynical, as characters may seem artificial rather than realistic individual. Congreve criticizes how manners hide selfish motives. So that concludes our lecture for today. I hope you have enjoyed the entire play in its completeness, and you have definitely got an exposure about the comedy during the Restoration Age and can understand about the importance of the prose work that we had analyzed way before, which was Jeremy Collier's prose work, a kind of critique on the comedies that were being written during the time. This, in a way, tells us that comedy is supposed to be taken with a pinch of salt, as certain times it may be a little harsh, but in its entireness, I think it does deliver a lot about the ways in which people were living in a certain way when the French influence was to be seen in England, and fashion was very important. So balance was not really established in the way it was supposed to, because excess of anything is bad, and seemingly too much control actually led to the imbalance, and there was a need for having something that was not that serious. And this is where Comedy of Manners really does turn out to be interesting. It is like a comedy where you just have to enjoy it for the truth that it is revealing and not really try to reflect on what the characters are representing and who they are representing. So that makes it a very intriguing way of understanding this play. And thank you for listening. And please do share it with someone who you think can benefit with the lecture. I'll be back soon with another lecture next week. Stay tuned. Until we meet again, this is me, Karishma. Take care.